Jaws wasn't just about the shark. That battered fishing boat became cinema's most iconic vessel, but the truth behind it involved near-death experiences, a boat that kept sinking, and a production nightmare that almost destroyed Steven Spielberg's career. These are 20 weird facts about the Orca fishing boat hidden for decades. Number 20. The Orca was built, specifically to be destroyed. The boat seen in Jaws wasn't a real fishing vessel with years of ocean wear. Production designer Joe Alves designed and built the Orca, specifically for the film, knowing from the script's first draft that it would be destroyed in the climactic shark attack. Alves studied authentic New England fishing boats docked around Martha's Vineyard, photographing details and interviewing fishermen about what made their vessels functional and believable. He then deliberately built a boat that looked weathered and used, but was actually constructed to break apart on cue during filming. The Orca was shorter than typical charter fishing boats, only 38 feet compared to the standard 45 to 50 feet, because Spielberg wanted the shark to appear more massive by comparison. This scaling trick made Bruce, the mechanical shark, seem genuinely threatening when positioned near the boat during attack sequences. The construction used cheaper materials than real fishing boats would require, since longevity wasn't a concern, only surviving long enough to complete filming before being intentionally destroyed. The boat's interior was also modified with camera mounts and lighting rigs hidden within the structure, allowing cinematographers to capture shots impossible on authentic vessels. Building the Orca from scratch gave Spielberg complete control over every detail, ensuring the boat served the film's dramatic needs rather than conforming to actual maritime functionality or safety standards. Number 19. The boat sank multiple times during production.
You're gonna need a bigger boat, right?
The Orca's most notorious problem was its tendency to sink without warning during filming. The boat went down at least 4 separate times during production, sometimes while cameras were rolling, and other times overnight when left unattended at the dock. The sinkings were caused by a combination of factors including hull leaks from the boat's rushed construction, damage from mounting heavy camera equipment, and Martha's Vineyard's unpredictable weather, creating waves that swamped the vessel. Each sinking created production delays lasting days, while crews raised the boat, pumped out water, dried equipment, and made repairs sufficient to continue filming. The cast and crew developed dark humor about the situation, joking that the Orca was trying to escape the production, or that it was committing suicide to avoid working with a temperamental mechanical shark. Insurance companies covering the production grew increasingly nervous about the boat's reliability, threatening to pull coverage if proper maritime safety protocols weren't implemented. Spielberg was forced to hire additional safety boats and divers who remained on standby during every water scene, adding unexpected costs to a budget already spiraling out of control. The repeated sinkings became symbolic of Jaws' broader production problems, representing how nothing worked as planned, and every day brought new disasters that threatened to shut down filming permanently. The boat's instability meant that scenes had to be shot quickly before something went wrong, creating pressure that actually improved performances by forcing actors to react authentically to genuine danger rather than manufactured movie peril. Number 18. Robert Shaw insisted on doing his own stunts. Robert Shaw, playing grizzled shark hunter Quint, refused to use stunt doubles for most of his scenes aboard the Orca, despite the genuine dangers involved. Shaw was a serious actor who believed physical authenticity was essential to creating believable characters, and he wouldn't let someone else perform. Actions audiences would attribute to his performance. He climbed the Orca's rigging, handled all the shark hunting equipment himself, and performed the scene where Quint slides down the tilting deck toward the shark's mouth without safety equipment beyond a thin cable audiences couldn't see on camera. His insistence terrified the insurance company and frustrated Spielberg, who worried constantly about losing his lead actor to injury or death in the Atlantic Ocean. Shaw had significant sailing experience from his time in the Royal Navy, which gave him confidence handling boats that the other actors lacked, but maritime experts on set warned that his military training didn't prepare him for the specific dangers of working on an unstable film set boat, surrounded by camera equipment and mechanical effects. The actor's drinking problem made the situation worse, as Shaw would sometimes perform dangerous stunts while intoxicated, creating scenarios where disaster was barely avoided through luck rather than planning. His commitment to authenticity elevated his performance, making Quint feel genuinely weathered and capable, rather than like an actor playing dress-up. But it came at tremendous risk that could have ended the production if anything had gone seriously wrong during his more dangerous moments aboard the Orca. VAM number 17. The Orca's engine sound was completely fake. The distinctive rumbling sound of the Orca's engine that audiences hear throughout Jaws was created entirely in post-production and bore no resemblance to the actual boat's engine noise. The real Orca was powered by a standard marine diesel engine that produced a high-pitched mechanical whine, completely unsuitable for a movie about masculine conflict and primal danger. Sound designers recorded various engines, including semi-truck diesels, industrial generators, and even modified recordings of locomotives, then blended them together to create a deep, powerful rumble that suggested barely contained mechanical violence. They wanted the boat's engine to sound like an extension of Quint's personality, rough and aggressive, and utterly reliable, despite appearing worn and battered. The fabricated engine sound was synchronized carefully to match the boat's movements on screen, with audio engineers adjusting pitch and intensity to reflect throttle changes and mechanical strain during chase sequences. This audio manipulation was essential to Jaws' overall sound design, which prioritized emotional impact over documentary accuracy in every aspect. The Orca's fake engine rumble joined the shark's manufactured sounds, and John Williams' iconic score as audio elements that existed only to serve the film's dramatic needs. Audiences never questioned the authenticity of what they heard, accepting the dubbed engine noise as real because it matched their expectations of what a tough fishing boat should sound like, demonstrating how perception trumps reality when creating cinema that prioritizes visceral experience over factual representation of how things actually work or sound in the real world. Number 16. Roy Scheider hated being on the boat.
I need a bigger boat.
Roy Scheider, playing Police Chief Brody, was miserable during every moment spent aboard the Orca because he suffered from severe seasickness that worsened throughout production. Scheider had grown up in landlocked New Jersey and had minimal boating experience before Jaws, never realizing how badly he'd react to spending long days on a rocking boat in the Atlantic Ocean. He vomited frequently between takes, lost significant weight during filming, and developed a genuine phobia of deep water that affected his ability to perform certain scenes convincingly. His physical misery actually helped his performance since Brody was supposed to be uncomfortable on the ocean, terrified of water, and out of his element on Quint's boat. Scheider's authentic nausea and fear translated as brilliant character work, making Brody's discomfort palpable and relatable to audiences who'd also experienced motion sickness or anxiety about deep water. Behind the scenes, Scheider begged Spielberg to shoot his scenes as quickly as possible and to film as much as feasible on land, or using process shots that didn't require him actually being on the ocean. The director accommodated when possible, but many scenes absolutely required genuine ocean footage with all three actors aboard the Orca, forcing Scheider to endure conditions that made him physically ill day after day. His professionalism never wavered despite his suffering, delivering nuanced performances while feeling wretched. But he swore after Jaws wrapped that he'd never do another movie requiring significant boat work, a promise he mostly kept throughout his subsequent career in Hollywood. Number 15. The boat's name had multiple meanings.
Martin, goddammit! Come here, come here!
The name Orca was chosen deliberately for its multiple symbolic meanings within the film's narrative structure. Orcas are killer whales, apex predators that actually hunt and kill great white sharks in the wild, making the boat's name an ironic representation of the hunter's confidence that they're the superior predators in this situation. Peter Benchley, who wrote the novel Jaws was based on, suggested the name during early script development, recognizing its thematic resonance with the story's exploration of masculine competition and natural hierarchy. The name also referenced Moby Dick, Herman Melville's classic novel about obsessive whale hunting, that clearly influenced Jaws' narrative structure and character dynamics. Quint is explicitly positioned as an Ahab figure, a monomaniacal captain whose obsession with coaling his white whale leads to destruction, and naming his boat after another predatory sea creature reinforced that literary connection. The Orca's name worked on multiple levels that enriched the film's meaning without requiring audiences to consciously recognize every reference. Most viewers simply accepted it as an appropriately nautical name without considering deeper implications, while more literary-minded audience members appreciated the symbolic layers. The choice reflected the intelligence behind Jaws' seemingly simple premise, demonstrating that Spielberg and his collaborators were crafting a film with thematic depth and classical literary influences rather than just making a monster movie about a killer shark eating people at the beach. Number 14. The Orca's interior was bigger than the exterior. Just like many television and film boats, the Orca's interior scenes were filmed on a soundstage set that was significantly larger than the actual boat's physical dimensions could accommodate. The real Orca's cabin was cramped and claustrophobic, barely allowing room for 3 adult men to stand simultaneously. But Spielberg needed space for cameras, lights, and crew members during interior scenes. The solution was building a separate interior set at a soundstage facility that matched the Orca's design details, but provided adequate working room for film production. The fake interior was built 40% larger than the real cabin, giving actors space to move naturally and allowing camera operators to capture shots from multiple angles impossible in the genuine confined space. Sharp-eyed viewers noticed continuity errors, where characters would duck through a small hatch visible in exterior shots, then emerge into an impossibly spacious cabin that couldn't physically fit within the boat's hull. The production team gambled that audiences would be too absorbed in the story to notice these spatial impossibilities. And they were mostly correct. The fake interior allowed Spielberg to film the famous Indianapolis speech and other crucial cabin scenes with proper lighting and multiple camera setups that would have been impossible aboard the actual Orca. This deception was standard practice in filmmaking, where dramatic needs always trumped physical reality. But it represented another way that Jaws production created illusions that served storytelling, rather than documenting authentic maritime experiences or respecting actual boat architecture and spatial limitations. Number 13. The boat cost more than the mechanical shark. While most Jaws production stories focus on Bruce the mechanical shark's problems and expenses, the Orca actually cost more to build, maintain, and operate throughout filming than all 3 mechanical sharks combined. The boat's construction budget was $75,000, not including the separate interior set, while the 3 mechanical sharks together cost approximately $200,000, but were used far less frequently. The Orca appeared in nearly every scene during the film's second half, requiring constant maintenance, repairs from damage, salvage operations after sinkings, and fuel costs for moving it to various filming locations around Martha's Vineyard. The cumulative expenses associated with keeping the Orca functional throughout production exceeded $300,000, making it one of the most expensive single props in 1970s cinema. Insurance costs alone were staggering, since the boat carried valuable camera equipment, had 3 expensive actors aboard regularly, and kept sinking or experiencing mechanical failures that threatened lives and production schedules. The shark could be worked on in controlled tank environments and simply not used when it malfunctioned, but the Orca was essential to so many scenes that production couldn't proceed without it functioning properly. Spielberg later joked that he should have made a movie about a killer boat instead of a killer shark, since the Orca caused far more production problems and budget overruns than Bruce ever did. Though audiences would never know from watching the finished film how much difficulty that humble fishing boat created behind the scenes. Number 12. Real fishermen hated how the Orca was handled. Professional fishermen and maritime experts who watched Jaws filming around Martha's Vineyard were appalled by how the Orca was operated during production. The boat was frequently overloaded with camera equipment, crew members, and actors beyond its safe capacity, creating dangerous stability issues that violated basic maritime safety principles. The Orca's handling during chase scenes involved maneuvers that no experienced captain would attempt, including sharp turns at speeds unsafe for a boat that size, and running through waters where depth and obstacles hadn't been properly surveyed. Local fishermen who worked as technical advisors tried warning Spielberg and the marine coordinators about dangerous practices, But production pressures and the director's inexperience with boats led to their concerns being dismissed or ignored. Several near disasters during filming proved the fishermen's warnings valid, including moments where the Orca nearly capsized or came dangerously close to running aground on hidden sandbars. The technical advisors eventually quit in frustration, refusing to be associated with a production that they felt was recklessly endangering lives for the sake of dramatic camera shots. Their departure left Spielberg and his crew even less prepared to handle maritime emergencies when they inevitably occurred. The fishermen's criticism wasn't about the film itself, but about the disrespect shown to proper seamanship and ocean safety. Feeling that Hollywood's arrogance about knowing better than experienced professionals created unnecessary risks that could have resulted in deaths that would have been entirely preventable with proper planning and respect for maritime expertise. Number 11. The boat's destruction. As scene required, 3 attempts. The climactic sequence where the Orca is destroyed by the shark's attacks required 3 separate attempts to capture successfully. The first attempt failed when the mechanical systems designed to tilt and brake the boat malfunctioned, leaving the Orca largely intact when it should have been dramatically splitting apart. The second attempt went too far, with the boat breaking apart so quickly and completely that cameras couldn't capture the gradual destruction Spielberg wanted, the pieces sinking before key shots could be filmed. The third attempt finally succeeded after engineers completely redesigned the braking mechanisms and carefully choreographed exactly how and when each section of the boat would fail. The successful destruction took months of preparation with the special effects, team testing scale models repeatedly to ensure they understood precisely how to control the Orca's demise. The scene required multiple cameras rolling simultaneously, since there would be no opportunity for reshoots once the boat was destroyed. Spielberg positioned cameras on nearby boats, on floating platforms, and even underwater to capture every angle of the destruction sequence. The final edited sequence combined footage from all 3 attempts, with clever editing hiding the fact that viewers were watching different boats breaking apart in different ways at different times. The destruction represented hundreds of thousands of dollars in construction and special effects, work for a sequence lasting only a few minutes on screen, demonstrating the incredible expense and effort required to create movie moments that audiences experience as seamless and inevitable, rather than recognizing the multiple failed attempts and technical complexity hidden behind finished film. Number 10. The Orca. Had no bathroom facilities. The actual Orca boat used for filming had no functioning bathroom, creating miserable conditions for cast and crew during long shooting days on the Atlantic Ocean. Typical fishing charters include a small head below deck for basic sanitation, but the Orca's interior had been gutted and reconfigured to accommodate camera equipment and lighting rigs, eliminating any space for bathroom facilities. This meant that everyone aboard during filming had to hold it for hours or use buckets in the cabin when absolutely necessary, creating humiliating situations that destroyed any sense of glamour about movie making. The lack of bathrooms was particularly difficult for Roy Scheider, whose seasickness often included nausea that made the bucket situation even more degrading and uncomfortable. Production assistants on nearby safety boats would bring the actors back to shore for bathroom breaks when possible. But ocean conditions and filming schedules often made this impractical, forcing everyone to simply endure the discomfort. Female crew members faced especially challenging situations, with the male-dominated production team initially not considering how the lack of facilities would affect them differently. This oversight led to complaints, and eventually resulted in a designated boat with proper bathrooms stationed nearby. Though getting to it still required interrupting filming and making the uncomfortable transition between vessels and open water. The bathroom situation became another source of tension and misery during a production already plagued with problems, making the Orca a genuinely unpleasant place to spend 12-hour workdays regardless of how romantic ocean filmmaking might seem to outsiders. Number 9. Steven Spielberg, nearly drowned, filming from the Orca. Steven Spielberg came terrifyingly close to drowning during filming when he fell overboard from the Orca while trying to capture a specific camera angle. The young director was leaning far over the rail to line up a shot when an unexpected wave hit the boat, throwing him into the cold Atlantic Ocean. Spielberg was wearing heavy clothing and boots that immediately became waterlogged, pulling him under before safety crew members could react. He struggled to resurface, swallowing water and panicking as he realized how quickly he was sinking, despite being a decent swimmer under normal circumstances. A crew member dove in and grabbed him, pulling him back to the surface, where other hands hauled both men back aboard the Orca. The entire incident lasted less than 2 minutes, but traumatized everyone who witnessed it, forcing them to confront how easily the ocean could cull someone, regardless of how careful they tried to be. Spielberg spent the rest of the day shaking and wrapped in blankets, deeply shaken by how close he'd come to dying for a camera shot. The near drowning forced production to implement stricter safety protocols, including mandatory life jackets for anyone near the rails, and additional safety divers positioned around the Orca during all filming. Spielberg later admitted the incident gave him genuine respect for the ocean's power and made him understand why the local fishermen had been so critical of the production's cavalier attitude toward maritime safety and proper seamanship protocols. Number 8. The boat's wood was painted to look more weathered. The Orca was built from new lumber, but production designers spent weeks artificially aging the wood to make the boat appear decades old and heavily used by the sea. They used various techniques, including beating the wood with chains, applying chemical treatments that simulated sun damage and salt corrosion, and carefully painting layers of different colors that were then partially sanded away to suggest old paint jobs wearing through over years of exposure. The designers studied photographs of genuinely old fishing boats, noting exactly how wood deteriorated in marine environments and which areas showed the most wear based on sun exposure and water contact. They replicated these natural aging patterns artificially, creating a boat that looked authentically weathered despite being brand new. The aging process was essential to establishing Quint's character before he even appeared on screen, since the Orca's worn appearance communicated that its owner was a serious working fisherman rather than a weekend hobbyist with pristine equipment. Production designers later said the Orca's aging was some of their most successful work on Jaws, creating a completely convincing illusion that even experienced fishermen accepted as genuine until they examined the boat closely. The attention to detail in making new wood look old demonstrated the craftsmanship behind Jaws' production design, showing how every element was carefully considered to support character development and story authenticity, even when audiences wouldn't consciously notice the specific techniques being employed to create believable environments and props. Number 7. Richard Dreyfuss refused to go near the boat. Initially, Richard Dreyfuss, cast as oceanographer Matt Hooper, initially refused to set foot on the Orca because he had a genuine phobia of deep water and boats. Dreyfuss had nearly drowned as a child and developed an intense fear of any situation where he couldn't see or touch the bottom beneath him. He accepted the role, believing most of his scenes would be filmed from shore or in controlled tank environments, not realizing how much time he'd need to spend on an actual boat in the open ocean. When he first saw the Orca and understood what filming would require, he panicked and told Spielberg he couldn't do it. The director spent hours convincing Dreyfuss that the role was perfect for him and that they'd work together to manage his fear through gradual exposure and proper safety measures. Dreyfuss eventually agreed to try, starting with short periods aboard the docked Orca before progressing to calm water sailing and finally open ocean filming. His genuine anxiety actually enhanced his performance, making Hooper seem more vulnerable and human, despite being the scientific expert who supposedly understood the ocean. Dreyfuss later credited Spielberg with helping him overcome a lifelong fear, though he admitted he was still terrified during every moment spent aboard the Orca throughout production. His willingness to face his phobia for the role demonstrated professional commitment, but it also meant he was genuinely frightened during scenes where his character was supposed to appear confident, creating interesting tension between actor and character that added unexpected depth to Hooper's portrayal. Number 6. The Orca's radio equipment was completely non-functional. All of the marine radio equipment visible in the Orca's cabin was non-functional prop pieces that couldn't actually transmit or receive communications. This created dangerous situations during filming because the boat had no way to call for help if emergencies occurred while shooting scenes far from shore. The production relied entirely on nearby safety boats maintaining visual contact with the Orca, but fog, rough seas, and the distances involved sometimes made this monitoring unreliable at best. Coast Guard officials who learned about the lack of functional radio equipment were horrified, explaining that maritime law required vessels operating that far offshore to maintain working communication systems for exactly these emergency scenarios. The production installed a functional radio only after the Coast Guard threatened to shut down ocean filming entirely, recognizing that the lack of communication equipment violated federal safety regulations, regardless of whether this was a movie production or commercial fishing operation. The prop radios remained visible in shots to maintain the Orca's authentic appearance, but a hidden functional unit was added below deck, where it wouldn't appear on camera. This represented another example of Jaws production prioritizing visual authenticity over actual safety, creating dangerous situations that could have resulted in tragedy if serious emergencies had occurred when the boat was out of visual range from support vessels and unable to radio for assistance from the Coast Guard or other nearby boats that might have been able to provide help. Number 5. The boat's shark fishing equipment was historically inaccurate. Maritime historians and fishing experts have pointed out that much of the shark fishing equipment aboard the Orca was either historically inappropriate for 1975 or completely impractical for actually catching large sharks. The barrels Quint uses to tire the shark were an outdated technique by the mid-70s, replaced by more effective methods using modern materials and approaches. The harpoon system shown in the film was also antiquated, resembling equipment from decades earlier, rather than what professional shark fishermen actually employed during that era. Quint's character was deliberately written as old-fashioned and stuck in the past, so the outdated equipment served character development even if it didn't reflect actual fishing practices. However, some of the gear was simply wrong regardless of time period, including rope configurations and knot work that experienced sailors immediately recognized as incorrect or dangerous. Technical advisors tried correcting these errors during production, but Spielberg often prioritized how equipment looked on camera over whether it would actually function properly in real fishing scenarios. The result was a boat outfitted with gear that appeared authentic to general audiences, but made experts cringe at the inaccuracies and impractical choices. These errors didn't matter to Jaws' success, since most viewers lacked the specialized knowledge to spot problems, but they represented missed opportunities to educate audiences about actual shark fishing while telling an exciting story that could have been both entertaining and accurate, with slightly more attention to historical and technical details. That's number 4. The Orca's sinking was partially unscripted. The scene where the Orca begins taking on water and slowly sinking wasn't entirely scripted as filmed, instead incorporating genuine boat problems that occurred during production. During one shooting day, the Orca actually started sinking unexpectedly due to hull leaks, and Spielberg made the quick decision to keep cameras rolling and capture the real emergency as it unfolded. The actors' genuine concern and rushed attempts to address the flooding were authentic reactions to actual danger rather than performances, giving those moments an intensity that scripted scenes rarely achieve. Spielberg later worked this footage into the film's climax, combining the unscripted real sinking with planned destruction sequences to create a more visceral and believable boat death. The decision to use real disaster footage was controversial, with some crew members feeling it was exploitative to turn a genuine safety emergency into entertainment, but others argued it resulted in more powerful cinema than any scripted version could have produced. The blurred line between reality and fiction during this sequence exemplified Jaws' entire production, where constant problems and near disasters became raw material that Spielberg incorporated into the final film. The Orca's real struggles to stay afloat mirrored the production's constant battle against budget overruns, schedule delays, and technical failures that threatened to sink the entire project just as surely as water flooding the boat's hull threatened to send it to the ocean floor. Number 3. The boat influenced the decades of marine design. The Orca's distinctive appearance influenced fishing boat design and aesthetics for decades after Jaws' release, with boat builders reporting increased demand for vessels matching its style and color scheme. Charter fishing operations around the country repainted boats to resemble the Orca, recognizing that customers associated that look with authentic fishing experiences and masculine adventure. Boat manufacturers introduced models specifically marketed as Orca-inspired designs, featuring similar hull configurations, cabin layouts, and the weathered working boat aesthetic that Jaws had made desirable. the influence extended beyond fishing vessels into yacht design and recreational boating, where the rugged utilitarian style became fashionable among wealthy buyers wanting to project unpretentious authenticity rather than obvious luxury. Marine architects credited Jaws with shifting American boat design away from sleek modernist aesthetics toward more traditional working vessel appearances that emphasized function and character over pure style. The Orca became a template that influenced everything from sport fishing boats to pleasure cruisers, its visual DNA visible in thousands of vessels designed and built in subsequent decades. This cultural impact demonstrated how a single iconic prop could reshape an entire industry's design language, proving that Jaws' influence extended far beyond cinema into actual consumer products and manufacturing decisions. The Orca transcended its origins as a movie prop to become a genuine design icon that changed how people thought about boats and what made them appealing or desirable as both tools and status symbols. Number 2. Most of the original Orca was destroyed and lost. Unlike many famous movie props, the original Orca was never preserved. The boat scene destroyed on screen was genuinely broken apart and sunk during filming. While a few pieces were briefly recovered for reshoots or publicity, most of the remains were abandoned around Martha's Vineyard or lost to the ocean. Some crew members salvaged small fragments as souvenirs, which later surfaced at auctions and sold for thousands despite having no practical value. The absence of a completely preserved Orca is a major regret for fans and historians, leaving only replicas to represent the vessel that endured Jaws' famously troubled production. Number 1. The Orca became more famous than real fishing boats. The Orca achieved a level of fame real fishing vessels rarely do, becoming more recognizable and culturally significant than boats that worked the seas for decades. Charter captains noted tourists cared more about whether a boat resembled the fictional Orca than its safety or fishing ability. The vessel transcended function to symbolize masculine adventure, ocean danger, and man versus nature. Museums displayed Orca replicas while ignoring real maritime history. Its fame permanently linked the name Orca to Jaws, overshadowing real killer whales. Built to sink, the Orca became immortal, proving fiction can overpower reality and shaping collective memory. If these facts changed how you see Jaws, share this story, because some legends deserve the truth behind the terror.